Crisis to Clarity, Troy Karnes on the power of better decisions. The purpose of the show exists to transpire transformation in both life and business. Through candid conversations with authors, leaders, and changemakers, we uncover wisdom and practical tools you need to survive. What if the very experiences that nearly broke you became the foundation for helping others make their sharpest choices? Troy Karnes is an author, speaker, and founder of Donovan Enterprises, where he works with executives to strengthen their decision making under pressure. In this episode, Troy shares how his cancer diagnosis and early recovery became the crucible for a system that now shapes stronger leaders. There's a story not just about quick fixes and motivational slogans, it's about building resilience through structure, discipline, and perspective. Ready to sharpen your decision making and lead with clarity? Connect with Troy at Business Donovan Enterprises, storytelling and thought leadership, good vibes, ghostwriting, speaking, and workshops. Troy can help your team make better decisions under pressure, share his inspiring journey with your audience, and implement proven systems that protect your edge in business and life. And with that, I want to welcome Troy to the program. How are you doing today, Troy?
I'm great, man. Thank you for the introduction. I hope my head doesn't get too big for the screen here after that. Holy moly.
No, I think you're being too modest. So, I'm really curious. I know your story, but definitely tell us something about your story, and find it really inspiring.
Yeah. So 4 years ago, it's almost exactly 4 years ago. My surgeon said to me, he's like, "Well, you have big, scary, dangerous, rare cancer." And I said, "Well, that's like bingo. That's like the bingo card. None of those are words I want to hear from my surgeon, who is he hates it. He says, man, I hope I don't sound like a jerk." And I was like, "No, man, he is the most empathetic, nicest guy, and just like a really good dude. We're still very good friends." And the crazier thing is that, that news is, that'll shake you, right?
Yes, sure.
And it was enough to make somebody want to drink. But I had like 100 days of sobriety when I got that news.
Wow.
And recovery is hard. Addiction's hard, right? Like,
Yes.
if you wrap up all addictions together, like 85% of people won't make it a year before relapsing. It doesn't mean they won't have long-term success. It just means that early on, it's really hard. Now, if it's just alcohol, mine was alcohol, then it's more like 2/3 to 3/4 of people will relapse the first year. And I was supposed to graduate rehab the week I found out about my tumor. And I'm so thankful that I went to rehab first, because in those 100 days, I put together a system that kept my baseline for decision making. Literally kept me sane and sober through a couple gnarly surgeries. I had one surgery to remove my tumor. I had bone cancer. It was growing on my shoulder blade. They took my whole shoulder blade out and the shoulder joint too. And then 6 weeks later, had a second surgery to put an implant in, and then a year's worth of physical therapy to get my range of motion back and everything. They put the parts in you, but if you don't build up the muscles and everything around the parts, then the parts are worthless, right?
Right.
And everything that I had kind of put into place, allowed me to have a better outcome than anybody could have expected. And not just in terms of keeping my sobriety or in terms of like getting range of motion and strength and those kinds of things back. But like,
sure,
I lost over 50 pounds. I quit my 9-to-5. I replaced that salary in 6 months. I drive my kids to school every day. I'm a better father, better husband, better, and like that all happens because I'm just consistently making better decisions now than I was before. And that's what I teach, and that's what I coach, and that's what I write about.
Yeah, it just seems like such a natural flow here. You got to have a story, so please tell us about the book. Tell us about the story.
Yeah. So the book is essentially it's kind of three things together, right? It's like a third memoir, it's a third research, and then it's a third tactics. So people could like take something valuable away from it.
Mm.
And the structure of the book, I'm really proud of the structure of the book. But it's all based on a conversation that I had with a therapist in rehab. And I said, okay, the stats are bad. I just talked about the stats. They're bad. Like, how do people mess this up? And coming from business, I thought, okay, I'm going to figure out where people mess up. I'm going to avoid those things, and
Mhm.
then I'll just be successful. And she said, well, people don't make good decisions when they're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. That's terrifying
Yeah.
because you can't just avoid those things, right? Like those are conditions we're going to have every single day of our lives because we're
Mhm.
human, right?
Yes.
Um, and not just addicts. Like everybody with a pulse is going to deal with those things. And so it's terrifying. And also, I didn't like the way it got coached to me because it got
Hmm.
coached to me in terms of like when you feel these things, if you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, go fix that instead of
Mm.
having a drink. And it felt like it was going to take a lot of willpower. And I didn't end up in rehab because I had a lot of willpower. But I thought if I can be proactive and I could implement some systems to get ahead of these things, then I'll give myself a shot.
Mhm.
And
Right.
so the book is separated into those four things. And when I thought about HALT, right? So hungry, angry, lonely, tired, HALT, easy to remember. It's powerful because it fits on this matrix, right? Think about this. If you think about the issues in your life, lots of them are either physical or
Mhm.
emotional,
Mhm.
and then they're either internal, or maybe you can think personal, or external or social, right?
Sure.
Now, HALT fits perfectly on that matrix. It's hard to think of something more physical and internal than the feeling of hunger, right?
Mhm. Yes.
So then if you slide over and you get to the internal and emotional side of things, that's angry. Angry fills in for all emotions, right? It's kind of a placeholder for that. But our emotions, maybe we get triggered by external things, but we own our own feelings. And so that's where it fits. Then you drop down and you have external and emotional, and that's loneliness. This is about your relationship.
Mm.
It's the most important quadrant of the matrix. After doing all the research, I'm convinced this is the most important one. And then tired is like physical and external. Like, how's your body feel? How are what's your energy like?
Mm.
And so if we can proactively think about those four buckets, then we're going to raise the baseline of everything else that we do and all of the other decisions that we make. So the book goes through a personal story of mine, kind of memoir style, because I have four that fit. It's a cancer story about
Wow.
sobriety, story about raising a kid on the spectrum, and then traveling for work. So those four stories with a ton of research, and then tactics on how I overcame those issues, or not even overcame because there's no solution to them, right?
Mhm.
But how I nurture those and came out better the other side.
With all that, and I would say you have a full plate, to say the least. I'm
Yeah.
curious then, and a lot of writers or potential writers then often want to know, when do you write? And in your case,
Mm,
when do you have a chance to write? So some people
yeah.
write in the morning, the afternoon, the evening, night. So what was your writing process like?
Morning, morning. Um, in this process, I returned to what I was when I was younger, which is a morning guy. And people say like, oh, because I get up pretty early. People say like, oh, what do you do? Why get up so early? And I say, well, guess who else is up then? They say like nobody. I say, exactly. So
Yeah.
that's when my mind works the best, especially for writing, but it's also calm, it's peaceful, and it allows me to
Mhm.
start my day without chaos, right? And get myself ramped up for whatever
Sure.
will happen that day. So yeah, I'm a morning writing guy.
And then when you got the process down and you've written, a lot of authors struggle with the question of publishing. And so there are various options out there, probably more than there's ever been before. Could you walk us through what your thought and strategy was in regards to self-publishing, hybrid publishing, or traditional publishing?
100%. So I started querying agents. I feel like this is probably, I don't know how many people do that. This is what I did. I just started sending it out. I put together a prospectus. I have a friend who was published and said, oh, this is kind of the prospectus that I put together. So I used that as a guideline and started sending it out. And I got a response that said, I really like this idea, but we don't deal with any authors unless they already have a big following. And I said, well, that seems pretty lazy. Isn't that your job? I don't know. I'm not. And after a couple of days, when I, kind of let the steam blow off a little bit, I said, oh, it probably makes a little sense, right? Like if you have some people who might buy your book, that probably makes it easier. So, but I didn't know how to do that. So I just started randomly tweeting. I had no plan, Mick. I wish if I could go back, I would have a much better plan for this. But then I said, I don't know. So I just said, okay, these are some of the ideas in my book. I'm going to start that. And the guy who started the hybrid publisher that I ended up working with, reached out to me and said, hey, you have a pretty interesting story. Have you ever thought about writing a book? And I said, funny you should ask. I've written about half of it so far. And then he, told me about his program and everything. He's a great guy. And I said, okay, like this is the program for me. So I went hybrid, mainly because I was just I was moving pretty fast and I wanted to keep my momentum going. And they were going to provide a lot of these supports that I wasn't going to get if I tried to go it alone.
I see. Could you talk a little bit about the book, the content itself too? So you talked and referred to your system, but tell us about what's in the book.
Yeah. So the book has 4 memoir style stories. One is my cancer story, which is also, if you think about cancer or just disease generally, pretty internal and physical thing, right? So that fits there in the HALT matrix. I argue that addiction is largely an emotional issue and an internal one. So it fits there in the quadrant. My son is on the spectrum, and that really impacts his ability to be social. Sure. And so the book is a little bit about that, but a lot about fatherhood and how I dealt with that along, kind of throughout his diagnosis and issues he was having at school and those kinds of things. And then I spent 15 years traveling for work. And so I tell those stories because that really drained my energy. And so, every part of the book opens with one of those stories. Then it goes into the research. There's way too many endnotes, probably, there's 30 pages of endnotes in the thing, but I'm just a little bit of a nerd. And but really fascinating stuff in there. And then I close each part of the book with a chapter on the tactics and systems that I then use to go from research to actually help my life.
And that does seem to have this transition, because what I find fascinating about what you've done is a phrase that I call write the book, grow the business. That's essentially what you've done. You had a great story, you write the book, but then you've also turned that into a business asset as well. Could you talk about the connection between the book and your business?
Yeah, sure thing. It's funny because so many people told me I did it backwards. They're like, no, the book is the last thing. But if a lot of authors that I talk to or listen to also say, don't write a book. It's the worst thing ever. Only write a book if you absolutely have to write a book. If the book is inside of you and will not be held in, then write the book. And that's what happened to me. I had this book in me, so it came out, and then I said, okay, well, now I got to figure out what to do with it, right? Sure. And so, yeah, turning that into the business, which is essentially, I coach the system that I write about now. So I will I meet with clients, then we go through and I put together a personalized version of what I use on a daily basis, which is it's a check-in. It's on a Google form right now, which feeds a spreadsheet. Spreadsheet gives you graphs. Research shows that graphs are incredibly important to get people to stick with habits, because line graphs tell stories and you get it immediately, and it's visual and it's really impactful. So that's what we do. And then there's a journaling aspect to it as well. So the check-in is like 90 seconds, but then the journaling, you should spend longer on that. The structure of the journal is that there are 7 pillars of my life, and I write on one a day. And then it cycles back through the next week. And the reason that it does that is it doesn't eliminate, but it dramatically reduces resentments, which are some of the most toxic feelings that people can have. And it happens when people bury stuff. But if you're going into the same topic once a week, it's like you're shining a light in the attic, right? Like in all the dark spaces. If you do that once a week, there's not really any place for those resentments to build up before you're scraping them out again. And so through that interview process, then I will put together 7 pillars for your life. And then there are many journal prompts then that feed the same topic, right? So that you can think about that. And just like, for an example, here are mine. On Mondays, it's about affirmations, right? So like, be my own hype man when I start the week. Tuesday is about challenging emotions, because if you bury that stuff, man, it's going to come out in times when you don't want it. Big projects, I think, are really important. So Wednesday, we slay the dragon. You talk about your big projects. Thursday, marriage, or whatever if you're not married, it's your most important relationship. Friday, I like to do work, get all that out before the weekend starts. Saturday, kids. If you don't have kids, just friends. And then Sunday are your aspirations. Like, Sunday is a great day to think about your dreams. Okay. So I cycle through one of those every week. Now there are lots of different prompts that we're thinking about, like my kids, from a different angle every week. And the idea is that you're not, letting things build up, right? You're like confronting those things. And sometimes they just go away, right? Like sometimes you're a little annoyed about something, but it's no big deal. It goes away. But if you're still annoyed, like the next week or the next week, now you have to do something about it, because it's, something that's sticking with you. So it's important.
Now, when you said you're working with folks, and then I'm curious, like, who do you work with? Is there companies, industries? What it would be a typical person and those individuals that you do work for, or corporations that you work with?
Yeah, typically I'm working with executives, and especially I like to talk to people who just got new jobs, because people who got new jobs want to justify the new salary, the new title, the new everything. And what they do is they end up sacrificing the things that will make them good at that job. They work longer hours. They cut their sleep maybe. And sometimes they think like, oh, I operate just fine on 5 hours. The research is very, very conclusive that the people who think that they're as good on 5 hours as they are on 7 or 8 actually have the biggest gap in performance between when they sleep well and when they don't sleep well. They're overconfident. And so I like to think, like, if you think you're that good without any sleep, that's like not believing in gravity. But I promise you're wearing a parachute when you jump out of the plane, right? So so they do that. They like work through lunch or work through dinner because they have to get all the work done. They end up cutting time out. They cut time with their friends first and then their family. And so all of these things contribute to hungry, angry, lonely, tired, which means they're making worse decisions than they could be if they keep those baselines high. So I tend to focus on, before I started all this, I worked in beverage alcohol. So like half of my outreach goes to, beverage alcohol and hospitality, but otherwise, kind of like business executives, especially folks who just got big new jobs.
Could you give us some examples? Such and such a person did X, Y, and Z, and the result that happened as a result of talking with you and working with you.
Oh yeah, man. So I worked with a guy a couple months ago, and he was looking for a new job. Like his job was fine, but he was, kind of out there. And so, and man, there is nothing that can drag you down faster than looking for a job. It's just like constant judgment all the time, right? Like resume goes out or whatever. Like, and he was like pretty despondent. Like he was like really out of it. And I said, hey man, why don't we put this system into play? Right. And then it didn't take him 30 days before he started getting better interviews. And now he has, like, if he were to have invented a job, that's the one he got. It was his dream position. And he's crushing it now. It was a really great thing for him to see.
And when you are thinking of people that you work with, those are individuals that might be helped by your process. But I'm also then curious about maybe there's a larger framework, the company itself, and if there's one individual can make a change, are there examples that you give along those lines?
Yeah, I think I'm going to answer and then tell me if I understood your question right. But yeah, like I have done workshops where I bring in like a handful of leaders and walk them through all of this as like kind of a corporate workshop type setting, which has been really, really powerful. So that is one way that like I can get into organizations and say like, hey guys, if you all want to make better decisions as a group, here are some principles to follow. Here are some tactics that you can start implementing tomorrow. And then, like come give me the, like I'm here to help you be accountable and to keep this up, because that is the most important thing, right? Like people will start things every now and then they'll just like fade away, right? They need somebody to hold them to the habit and to keep them accountable and to just like be a soundboard, right? And so that's what I do, is keep them on the system, because once they stick with it for a little while, it's like, oh yeah, I am feeling better. It's like, oh yeah, imagine that. You're like, nurturing the foundations of your life, and now you're making better decisions across the board.
Yep. You answered the question. It's where I was going with this, because now I'm curious, when people write a book, do they are aware of the possibilities? Because it's not just simply book sales, let's say, but that's what you mentioned. I'm curious about how you've been able to apply to whether it's business seminars, webinars, masterminds, or speaking engagements, things of those nature.
It's all those things. It's all those things. Yeah. So yeah, some corporate workshops, some private coaching. I'm really into my mastermind, which puts a group together, because, working with a group and getting support from a group is, on the one hand, very scary. It can be scary to talk to people about struggles that you're having, but it's also the thing that will help you the most and take you the furthest. So that is one thing that I'm like most excited about. But then, yeah, man, like I'm up in front of groups. I love the Rotary groups. They're great. Because those are people who are like excited about doing good in the world anyway. So they're super aligned with my message anyway, which is really great. So yeah, speaking, coaching, and corporate workshops.
A lot of people would ask the questions like, what's the purpose of the book, or where the result is? It's credibility and authority. So I'm curious then, have you found in your business, say, higher client fees, people start coming to you because of the book? And in other words, could you talk about it, the book being a business asset?
I mean, right now, this book it's transformed my business altogether. I mean, before I wrote this book, I was really just focusing on sales consulting, right? And I wasn't adding like this kind of stuff into it. It was really much more of, okay, here are the spreadsheets that we need to run. Let me look at your numbers. Right? So now I'm working on a whole other level, which has been amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's what I can see. You have the inspiring story, you have the case studies, and you've been able to apply it. So that's what I find really fascinating about your approach. So I guess what I'm saying, if your person is a potential author and if they're a business leader, what would you recommend that they do, similar to what you have done?
Yeah, I think if they are thinking about a book in terms of like a way to raise their authority, I would have a plan for it ahead of time. Number one, right? Because I talk to a lot of authors who say like, oh, like I have all of this knowledge and experience and I want to share it, which is admirable and amazing. Let's have a plan for that ahead of time. number one. And then number two, like talk to people about your message and about your, like, the best thing I did when I started to write the book was the structures. Think about the structure of the book, like
Yeah.
spend like 5 times as many hours as you think you should on the table of contents, because it is the most important page in the whole book. That's like my biggest nugget that I tell people who are thinking about writing a book.
It comes really close to the things that I say, so I could definitely resonate, and I'm familiar with that.
Yeah.
What kind of services do you offer? In other words, what your business does, and if they read the book or if they buy the book, what kinds of things do you offer?
Yeah, sure. So here are the 3 things. Number one is the mastermind, right? So I coach the book over a year. We go in segments of quarters, right? So it's 3 months on hunger. So it's a lot of like nutrition, and your food and mood are tied. I mean, it's tighter than a ball of yarn that a kitten's had for an hour, right? So we talk about that. Then angry, lonely, tired, 3 months each. And once a month we get together. I will do like an educational section of that meeting, and then we will open it up to kind of the group. Then there's, like, obviously with that you get the daily check-in form. We personalize everything, your journal prompts, like everything to keep you going, and then me to keep you keep you going, accountable, and then to like raise flags, right? To be somebody who is an outside source who can say, have you thought about how this impacts that? And part of the journal does that because it graphs like how you're sleeping, how you're eating, what your mood is like, are you achieving your daily goals? And then you can see how those ebb and flow, because they all do. And for some people, it means like, okay, well, I haven't been sleeping as well, so now my mood is bad, so then I'm not eating as well. For other people, like for me, if I see my food going down, it means that there's something happening with my mood, and then it affects my mood affects sleep. So it kind of waterfalls that way. But you don't know if you're not looking at it, right? So that's why I'm there. And so then there's kind of constant community in that mastermind. For people who are like really shy about any kind of group thing, I'll do some private one-on-one coaching. And then last is the corporate workshop, where we come in. It's like a 4-hour session, walk through all of the tactics, how they get implemented, and how it can help your business. So those are the 3.
So we've talked about your inspiring story. We talked about the book itself, your writing process, the publication, and how, what is really important, I think, how you've been able to apply and prosper this to a business. How do people reach out to you now that they know something about your background and what you can do?
Okay, so easiest way is to go to troy.coach. That's gonna land you on my Calendly, and then we can set up a goals and alignment call where I kind of see like what's happening in your life. What do you want to achieve? What are some things that are kind of the red flags or the warnings that you're feeling? And then if it's a good fit, then we can move forward. And if it's not, like, listen, maybe it comes across, I'm a terrible hard closer. That is not, I am not giving anybody a hard close. So like, if I'm not for you, that's fine. Like, I can pass you along to somebody who might be a little bit better and who might be giving you the, more appropriate supports. But if it is like, yeah, man, let's move forward and let's get you to where you want to go. So it's troy.coach is the easiest way to get there.
Sounds fantastic. I've learned something, and good to see you again. I want to thank you for the person who has a very busy schedule and a lot of things on your plate. I appreciate you taking the time out and chatting with the audience today. Thank you very, very much, Troy.
Oh my gosh, Mick, I'm so humbled and honored that you would give me this space, and it's always good to talk to you, man. So thank you for having me.
You bet. Thanks for your time. You know, this is a great thing about the show. I learned something, and I get to see Troy again and guests like him. So thank you for joining us today. I also want to know that you can get a hold of me and I can assist you if you're thinking about writing a book. It's very important. Troy and others have found out that it's a great product and it really helps their business. So connect with me on LinkedIn, G. Mick Smith, the Doctor of Digital. And of course, I also want to thank those who are supporting the program. That is, the publishers of both Burning America and On Track, for their continued support of everything else that I do. Those 2 volumes are available on Amazon. Until the next time, thanks for joining me. This is the Doctor of Digital signing off. Until next time, Deus Volt.